Hi guys, Dave Pinson here, Philippine Bible Ministry. The Old Testament, the Old Covenant, the Torah was written to the Jew for the Jew, but it was written also for us, maybe even more for us. What the heck are you talking about? Let me give you a couple of examples. Let me try to open this up for you. And why is this important today? It's important because the Bible, from cover to cover, from Genesis 1 to the end of Revelation, is God's word, every jot and tittle, every word is important. Every word is God breathed. Not every person is inspired. It doesn't say that. It says every word is from God. I fully believe this, and I fully believe that if it wasn't written to you, each little section, it was certainly written for the believer today. So let's talk about this for a minute. Let's start with the prophets, and I'm going to explain something to you that I didn't even think about until this morning as I was praying. So here's the thing. The prophet, Jeremiah, we'll go with Jeremiah, we'll go with any of the prophets. They prophesied about the coming destruction of Jerusalem or taking away into captivity of Israel by the Assyrians or by the Babylonians, two separate events. They prophesied about this, right? So people will say, well, that was written to them. That was for them. That was to them, that they were going to be taken captive. And that sounds logical when you think, but if you stop, it's not. It's not logical. Why? Because they spoke these words to all the people. They didn't write them down and pass them around to all the people in the kingdom. They spoke these words. Now they were written down. We'll talk about that. The only place I know of where they were written down in red before it happened was in the book of Jeremiah, where Baruch read stuff that Jeremiah wrote down. Other than that, all the other prophecies were prophecies about being taken into captivity, the destruction in Isaiah and all this stuff, the destruction that was coming, right? Were spoken to the people. They heard it. They heard it. Done deal. Why was it written down? Well, when was it? When was it put into the Torah? When did the Torah come into existence? Because all they had was the Pentateuch, right? During the time of the prophets, all they had was the first 5 books, right? Moses wrote them down. It says Moses wrote them down. Most people believe, the scholars, good scholars and bad scholars, most scholars believe that the Torah was put together while they were in captivity by the Assyrians. So they were taken into captivity by the Babylonians, Judah was. And then after Nebuchadnezzar, his son, I forgot his name, he died, and then the Medes and the Persians took over, right? So during that time, that's when they believed the Torah. Some people believe a little bit later. But it was during their captivity that we actually have this stuff put together. So the people reading the Torah were reading it after it had already happened. So it wasn't written to them as a warning. It wasn't. It was written to them as a lesson. The lesson is obey God. The lesson is they're in captivity, right? The lesson is you're going to come out of captivity and I'm going to send you back, give you another chance. Obey God or this will happen again. That's the lesson written to them, right? What about us? Is it written to us? Well, yeah, it's written to us. Why? Are we going to be taken into captivity? And no. A lot of the specifics were for them. Just like when Solomon said, if my people are called by my name, then I will heal their land. You know that one, the National Day of Prayer. But then we always forget the second part of that section, the same idea, the same speaking time, not like a week later. And he says, but if they don't, I will destroy their land and it will become just there used to be America here. So be careful when you pray that prayer. You're not really thinking it through. But anyway, at the end of the day, it was written to them, right? It was written for these other people as a lesson, and for us as a lesson later on. What's the lesson for us? Well, it's really very simple. It's really very simple. Jesus said, "If you love me, you obey me," right? So the lesson is, if you're a believer, you obey Jesus. If you don't obey Jesus, you're not a believer, and not only that, you will be destroyed. Jesus said, "I never knew you. Get away from me. Depart from me." But we did all these things in your name. We're Christians. We went to church. We did all these things. Get away from me. I don't know you. Why? Because you didn't obey me. Anyway. So it was written for us, and then there's 2 things to think about. First of all, why was it written for us? What is the value of all that Old Testament's warnings? All right, so we obey God, we get it, right? Those people have the law, we don't have it. So what is it? Well, first of all, let's look at it this way. In the book of Acts, we have several sermons, right? The first one is Peter, and then we have Stephen, and then we have several by Paul. Maybe some more, but those are the ones that come to my mind, right? Every single one is the Old Testament. Every single one in the book of Acts where Paul is preaching, he tells a story. So that's what it was written for. It was written so people could get saved. Jesus even used the Old Testament. It says on the road to Emmaus, after he was resurrected, he walked with these two guys, and he starts telling them from the law and the prophets the story about him coming into the world through the Messiah coming, right, through the people of the chosen seed, right. So what's the purpose of the Old Testament? That's it. The purpose was so that we would know. Like, look at it this way. Look at it this way. In the old days, the Torah was written for the Jewish people, right? It was their book. It's their chosen people. Mostly they're the ones who only ones who read it. A lot of them, thousands, have read it over the years. Before we had a Bible, before we had a New Testament, thousands, right? Maybe even a million. I don't know. A lot of people over the years, a lot of centuries. Right? But what about now? What about since then? What about since we have a Bible? How many Christians have read the Old Testament? A lot more. So is that God's will? Of course, it happened. It's got to be God's will because it happened. It's happening, right? I'm not saying everything. I don't want to get into that argument of evil stuff happening in God's will. But I want to say this. Because Christians then it's for us. Because there's so many more people being blessed. And now salvation, that's why it's in the book of Acts, because the Old Testament is salvation. That's why all these, that's why they were given it. That's why Jesus said, the Messiah's here, I'm here. He was trying to explain to them, and they wouldn't listen because they had everything set in their little, which is the reason I'm against churchiosity, their little traditional mindset of how things should go, right? So the Old Testament's for us, guys. Some of it's directly for us, some of it's not directly for us. What I mean by that is, like I said before, we're not going to go into captivity, right? A lot of that stuff is not necessarily directed to us, but the story and the purpose is for us, right? So does that make sense, guys? God bless you guys. Ta-ta for now.